give me your name, please?
Sure, Craig Hallenstein.
Okay, Craig, and you've recently written a book called The Dolphin. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, Michael, it's a psychological thriller set in New Orleans on the 2-week ramp up to Mardi Gras, and it has a sex offender as its protagonist.
How did that come about?
9 years ago, I was driving through Chicago, fiddling with the radio, looking for a jazz station, when all of a sudden I heard a guy say, "We ought to round them all up and burn them in ovens." And I couldn't imagine who they were talking about. When I listened a little longer and realized it was sex offenders, I thought, yeah, of course, they're the most hated group in America. So much so that radio personalities could actually attack them using the hateful language of Nazi Germany and actually get away with it. So I thought there might be a story in that. And when I did research over the next few months, I learned that our nation's one-size-fits-all sex offender registry makes no distinction between violent predators and young kids, teenagers having sex, or people peeing along the side of a highway. And then I knew there was a real interesting story in that, and I wanted to explore the civil rights debacle that seemed to be to me.
So you don't really have a pony in the race, so to speak, in terms of having some personal beef to grind, or some legal charge looming in your background that pushed you to this direction. It's just you found this an interesting story, and a story that you thought needed to be told. Is that right?
Right, yeah, just a great story. My parents fought for civil rights in the 1960s, and my kids and I have been fighting for LGBT rights for years. But when this story came about, when I became aware of it 9 years ago, it's kind of like my head exploded. This was, in some ways, a worse infringement on civil rights than what I had ever encountered. Well, just going online and beginning to read all of the stories, the craziest thing I read was a story that came out of Evanston, Illinois, about a guy who was driving down the street, and a young girl ran her bike, dashed out in front of his car, and he slammed on the brakes to try to stop the car in time. Ran around in front of the car. "Are you all right? Are you all right?" He helps her up, and as he realizes that she is okay, he said, "Don't ever do that again. You could get killed." And she dashed off. He sat in his car trying to compose himself. And 5 minutes later, the young girl returned with a policewoman who arrested him for the illegal restraint of a minor. In other words, kidnapping. And I thought, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, this is just, it's so absurd and so unthinkable that this can't stand. But that was 9 years ago, and here we are 9 years later, and these examples have only gotten worse over time, not better. I mentioned at the conference earlier today, I make a good living as a business psychologist, and it never occurred to me that anyone could make any money off a book. And as it's turned out, you spend a whole lot of money writing a book. I'm thousands of dollars in the hole. But that's fine, because writing that novel was a labor of love, and especially tied to a subject that I felt passionate about. I'm way ahead. But I thought from the start that this book might be important to reforming or doing away with sex offender laws, from the standpoint that it provides a positive model of a wonderful guy who's just been creamed by the system. And I'd like the book to be read by people across the country. Right to this point, after 4 months, we have about 60 reviews on Amazon. And my favorite comment on those reviews is, I had no idea. I didn't know this kind of thing was going on. I assumed that all sex offenders were monsters. You know, and here's a really nice guy, and I'm going to have to rethink everything I've ever thought about sex offenders and what's really going on in the world. So when I hear comments like that, it's like, you know, this is wonderful. This is what I was after. So it was probably a year ago, I sent advance copies of the book to the various anti-registration groups around the country, saying, I'm out here, use me. I'd like to be a tool for the movement. So they invited me to come and speak, and had a wonderful time. Met so many wonderful people, and immediately I felt at home in this community, and I'm here to stay. We just watched the movie, I've forgotten the name, Untouchables. Just finished that movie, and you know, you see something like that, and you just want to start screaming at the system. It's such an affront, because if they can do that to one group, then they can do it to the next group and the next group. And we've got to stand up and be heard. I had a wonderful education. I had great set of parents, wonderful education. Well, you know, I need to use it for some good, not just to make a few dollars. I used the example this morning about there was a time in this country when many white people had never met a black person, didn't know any, only knew stuff about black people, only knew the stereotypes. And then a young Bill Cosby came on the scene, first as a charming comedian, and then as an equal partner with a white guy in I Spy, and then later as a doctor and well-to-do, you know, from a well-to-do upper middle class family. And white people, those who had never known blacks, felt like for the first time they actually knew one. And then we saw the same thing repeated with gay characters. There are a lot of straight people who thought, I don't know any gay people. And through various shows on TV, they were exposed to wonderful, positive role models, and were able to feel like, well, I know one now, or two or three, and they're really kind of neat, kind of cool people. And I can forget about a lot of those stereotypes. The same now needs to happen with sex offenders. I would encourage sex offenders, people on the registry, to come out of the closet, as gays did. And if we can do anything at all in the media from a positive standpoint to show the rest of the country who sex offenders are, who registrants are. There were wonderful people with generous smiles and warm hearts and caring people. I think that'll help tremendously to open people's minds a little bit and start a dialogue. What I would most hope for my book would be that it would start a dialogue nationwide where these issues aren't just talked about among registrants and attorneys, but that we get the man on the street, the woman on the street, to say, what's really going on? Are we making a mistake? Would love to see that happen. Well, for this movement, I think it's important to come out of the closet so that we can be seen as human beings. I say we because even though I don't have a sex offense in the background, I feel so much a part of the community. I'm talking in terms of we. I think it's so important that everyone live a life of integrity and a life of honesty, and that we do away with secrets. I think it's really important that we end secret lives, and yet most sex offenders, for logical reasons, are staying as hidden as they can be. But I don't know that from a mental health standpoint that's good. I think it would be far better to come out to the world and say, I know who I am, this is who I am, and this is who I'm not, and just stand by our truth and live that way, because I think secrets kill. I think secrets kill us physically and emotionally. And anything we can do to end the secret aspects of our lives and live full force is very emotionally healthy. Well, I think back to the movie that we just saw, and they're making a contrast between people with a lot of money who are persecuting sex offenders and those sex offenders who are essentially homeless and on the street. Those aren't the people that I met at this conference. The registrants at this conference are striving like everyone else. And I think that's where the general public can tap in and identify that we're all just trying to get through life. Life is not easy. It's a struggle for everybody. And we all have something. One of the things I said in the conference is that with my kids, we used to go around the dinner table, and one of my kids has autism and one has ADD, and my ex-wife could only see out of one eye, and I have migraines and a fear of flying. It's like everybody has something, and the goal in life is to live life as fully as possible with all of our scars and our limitations, even when those limitations are brought to us from the outside. I mean, one of the limitations that we all have to deal with is income tax. So we all have things that we have to contend to in our lives. But what I see in this group are people who are striving, even under the adverse conditions that are imposed by the registries, to do better in life, to have a better life, to have as full and joyful a life as they can possibly have. And that's true for all of us.
It's largely a matter of separating truth from error, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think people would like the book. There have been about 60 reviews on Amazon, and they've been glowing. We're at about 4.8 out of 5 rating across reviews, and I think it's an enjoyable read. It's a very intense read. It's a thriller, but I think people will come away from the book with a much better understanding of what it's like to live under registration, and I think that's a good thing.
And your primary source of distribution is Amazon right now?
Yes, it can be ordered through any bookstore, but most of the sales are through Amazon. It's also available through Amazon Kindle and any other digital format. It's available on all digital formats.
All right, well, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.